Zippity-doo-dah, zippity-day. More Disney fun is on the way.
Enjoying the fun, it's here for everyone. In Wishmont or Cancun, La Paz or in Tulum.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is our final boarding call, and the doors will be closing soon.
WDW Radio, your information station.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to the WDW Radio Show, your Walt Disney World information station. I am your host, Lou Mangello, and this is show number 553, and I'm here once again not only to help you have the best vacation experiences when you go to the Disney parks, but I also want to bring you a little bit of Disney magic wherever you are with this podcast, my live video broadcasts on Facebook every Wednesday night, books, audio tours, videos, special events, and more. Whether you are a first-time visitor or have been to the parks hundreds of times, whether you're planning a vacation or just love the history, details, secrets, and stories, there is something here in the show for you. And every week, I'm going to take you from the parks to the screens and everything in between. And if you're a new listener, please go back and check out some of our old past episodes for interviews, top 10s, reviews, and more. And you can subscribe to the podcast in iTunes and find everything over at wdwradio.com. So I invite you to join me this week as we board our Walt Disney World Wayback Machine and go way, way back before Walt Disney World. And together, we're going to look at the how, when, and why Disney came to Florida and how it almost wasn't Florida at all. We'll explore the many legends and locations of where this second Disneyland was going to be built, including New Jersey and Canada, and the real reasons why they never came to be. We'll then discuss the process of finding Florida, why Orlando might not have been their first choice, and the many factors that led to deciding exactly where the world would be built. I'll then have the answer to our last Walt Disney World trivia question of the week, and I'll pose a new challenge for your chance to win a Disney Prize package. Then stay tuned to the end of the show. I'll have more information about our upcoming WDW Radio events and meets of the month, momentum, and more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of the WDW Radio Show.
And now, here is Walt Disney.
Welcome to a little bit of Florida here in California. This is where the early planning is taking place for our so-called Disney World project. Now, the purpose of this film is to bring you up to date about some of the plans for Disney World. But before I go into any of the details, I want to say just a word about the site of our Florida project. As you can see on this map, we have a perfect location in Florida, almost in the very center of the state. In fact, we selected this site because it's so easy for tourists and Florida residents to get here by automobile. Now, in larger scale on this map, our Florida land is located partly in Orange County and Osceola County, between the cities of Orlando and Kissimmee. And the important thing is that the Disney World is located just a few miles from the crossing point of Interstate 4 and Sunshine State Parkway, Florida's major highways carrying motors east and west and north and south to the center of the state. The sketches and plans you will see today are simply a starting point, our first overall thinking about Disney World. Everything in this room may change time and time again as we move ahead. But the basic philosophy of what we're planning for Disney World is going to remain very much as it is right now. We know what our goals are. We know what we hope to accomplish. And believe me, it's the most exciting and challenging assignment we've ever tackled at Walt Disney Production.
As much as I enjoy speculating and dreaming about the future, I'm equally as fascinated with how we got here. the history of Walt Disney World and our journey from desolate swampland to this #1 vacation destination in the world and truly a place where dreams do come true. And we've all heard about how the world began and since the world began. This week, I want to talk about before the world began, the how, the when, and the why Walt Disney World came to Orlando, and some of the many mysteries and misdirections it took to get here. So this week, we're going to maybe ask, why Florida? How did Disney end up in Florida, and some of the challenges to start building things here? And a man who also questions why Disney, with the weather getting hotter and love bugs in full love-in, is my friend, raconteur, and many time over published author Jim Korkis, who, by the way, just happens to have a new book out called The Unofficial Walt Disney World 1971 Companion. My friend, Mr. Korkis, welcome back.
Hey, Lou, thank you for inviting me back. I'm always excited to be on this podcast, and you have some of the best listeners in the world because they're so interested in history. And as we've discussed in the past, that's not always the case these days, that people are interested in Disney history. And especially Disney itself is constantly moving forward. So it's like a flood. Oh, my gosh, there's going to be Skyliner gondolas. There's going to be Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. There's going to be they're going to rip up the bricks in front of Magic Kingdom, so there's always something going on, but every now and then it's nice to go back and reflect on, how did we get here? What was the foundation? What was all of this to get there? And yes, we're approaching the 50th anniversary of Walt Disney World. I think a lot of people still think of that as, oh, well, that was the new park, and 50 years. And so I looked around, and there really weren't any books that were covering, how did this get started? How did this develop? Why were certain choices made and all that? And fortunately, since I worked at Walt Disney World for 15 years, I got a chance at that time to talk with a lot of the people who were there in 71 and before, and nobody had talked to them. And so they were just really excited to talk to me because I just love listening to all of this. And when I worked at Walt Disney World, I also had access to all of the different departmental libraries. So I was able to go in and see documentation and all of this beyond just the regular press releases. And it finally occurred to me there might be 2 or 3 other people who are interested in this. And, I'm certainly not getting any younger. It's time to get this information, down, so that, and again, I don't have the entire story. Disney history is like this massive jigsaw puzzle, and I have a lot of pieces, but I don't have all of the pieces. But if I put my pieces down, maybe somebody else will say, oh, I have this piece that looks like a duck flying in the sky. That goes right there, and we'll get a fuller perspective on all of this. But coming to Florida it started almost as soon as Disneyland opened in 55, and you and I have talked about this. What was Walt thinking? It's hot, it's humid, there's alligators, there's swamps. There's none of the resources that you'd be able to find in the Los Angeles area. when they came out here, they literally had to teach somebody how to do stained glass so that there would be stained glass for the windows in Cinderella Castle, because, again, those resources of people and techniques and material just didn't exist. So how insane was that to say, yeah, we're going, across the country, to the other side of the United States, and we're going to build something that is much, much larger than what we have out here.
And that's always something that fascinated me, because we've heard stories about, and we'll touch on some of these things about sort of how we got from point A, Disneyland, to point B here in Orlando. But I always wondered, like, how soon, Walt always being so forward-thinking, he was never complacent, he was never sort of satisfied with where he was, he was always looking to where he was going. And I was always curious, like, how soon after Disneyland opened and the pavement dried and all the toilets were working and the water fountains were working, was he starting to realize, hey, we need to do something else like this somewhere else? And that happened very quickly. I mean, really probably within, a year and a half of Disneyland opening is when they start looking elsewhere. And obviously Florida was not necessarily the first choice. There were a lot of other locations, both domestically and internationally, because obviously the Disney company was approached by people as opposed to just approaching, in terms of where this second Disneyland, for lack of a better term, was going to be.
Well, and yeah, we'll talk about officially. We can pinpoint that 1958 was the year that Walt first started considering Florida. But even as soon as Disneyland opened, everybody saw this as an immediate cash cow. And so by 1956, he had gotten, from around the world, Egypt, Brazil, Japan. They had all written to, the Disney studios and said, we would like to have a Disneyland here, And in fact, by 1960, there were almost several hundred, places. So, you hear these stories of, oh, well, Walt was going to build this in Texas. Well,
that rumor is just, that rumor is still going around. Like every couple of months, I get an email. Hey, Lou, I just want to let you know, don't tell anybody, but it's pretty much confirmed that Disney is building its third theme park here in blank, Texas.
Yeah. Well, what happened, of course, within the first few months that Disneyland was open, Walt, only had enough money for the park, and even then, there were millions of dollars of unpaid, debt that had to be taken care of, and so, that's one of the reasons he went to Jack Rather to build the Disneyland Hotel. Jack Rather said, if Walt had even had 2 pennies to rub together, he would have built a hotel, but he didn't, so he came to me, and popping up around Disneyland were all of these little cheap motels and souvenir shops and neon signs and, all of this. And Walt literally described it as a second-rate Vegas, that it was just gaudy and all of this. And he hated the idea that people had to come through all of that to get to Disneyland, and then when they left Disneyland, they had to go through all of that. So he immediately felt, I've got to get more land. And so as Disneyland starts to get, more successful, and he's actually taking money and reinvesting into Disneyland, he's also looking, where can I find, enough room so that not only can I build an amusement venue, but also have enough land, as a buffer, around that. And again, he never wanted to build another Disneyland. He told Marvin Davis, who did the layout for Disneyland and then later did the layout for Walt Disney World. He told him, he said, why would I ever build another Disneyland? You know, Disneyland is perfect as it is, you know. His Walt's brother Roy said, you know, Walt never liked to repeat himself. He always wanted to do something different. You know, Walt had that famous phrase, you can't top pigs with pigs, because when Three Little Pigs came out, and it was a huge success financially and critically, and so Walt made 3 more Three Little Pigs cartoons, because all of the theaters were saying, we want more pigs. People love the pigs. Give us, and I bet many of our listeners here can't even name those 3 cartoons that had the 3 little pigs and had the big bad wolf and all of that. And Walt at that point realized you can't top pigs with more pigs. You've got to take what you've learned and go on, you know, to another level. You know, for instance, Walt seriously considered having a string of Circle Vision 360 theaters around the world, and each theater would be playing its own particular film, and then that film would then, after a certain period of time, rotate to a theater somewhere else. And so Walt looked at building a Circle Vision theater up in Niagara Falls. He looked at one in St. Louis, you know, all of that. Walt had more ideas than he
had money. He had more ideas than he had money and time, right?
Yeah, to do any of that. But again, what people wanted, even when it came to Florida, what people wanted was another Disneyland. We want another Disneyland, you know.
Which, like you said, is not what he. Which is not what he was setting out to build.
I won't build another Disneyland as such. So, what he wanted to do was he wanted to take what he had learned and, you know, what can we do to expand it? And that's a lot harder than you think. You know, I talked to a couple of the Imagineers who worked on the Magic Kingdom, and they said, yeah, Walt said, you know, throw out everything we did at Disneyland and just start fresh and come out with and they said, we tried to do that, but we kept coming back to what Walt's come up with, where you have the one entrance and then you have a center hub that then spokes out to different places, because that was the most efficient. It was, the most guest-friendly, thing. And, why would you have a different Frontierland other than Frontierland? Because, people liked Frontierland. So it was a lot tougher, to reinvent the wheel than it should have been. But Walt was looking all over the place. Where could we do something? And as I said, in 1958, he had Harrison Buzz Price do a survey. Because they were looking for an East Coast area, because basically people from the East Coast really didn't come out to Disneyland, because remember, we're talking about the mid-50s, early 60s, and so plane flight wasn't just airline flight just wasn't as common as it is today, and it would have taken an investment of money. And again, you come out to Disneyland, and now what do? Well, maybe you go see the orange groves. Maybe you go to the beach. Maybe you go to Knott's Berry Farm. But,
no, you don't.
But again, it's really not a vacation, destination. And so Walt's feeling was, well, if the East Coast won't come out to Disneyland, let's put something out. Let's go out to the East Coast, and we'll do something. And when he moved from ABC to NBC in '61. General Sarnoff, who was in charge of NBC, tried to convince Walt, I've got the perfect place for you for the next Disneyland.
I'm laughing because obviously I know where.
And I've even paid for a survey, that says yes, this is the perfect place. New Jersey. Somehow I can't picture, the next Disneyland would be in New Jersey, but basically NBC and Sarnoff had some land there in the Jersey meadows, and Walt, of course, is not going to take other people's word for that, so he has Buzz Price go out and survey as well, and Price literally says, hey, NBC is wrong. First off, you've got a different demographic of people, in New York and New Jersey. Most of them are there, going on business trips. It's not like they're going on a vacation there. And also you've got weather. So that amusement venue can only operate, 120 days a year. Being a California boy, that was a real shock to me, when I would hear from friends, back east of, oh yeah, well this is, I'm working at Joyland, I'm working at Funland, and we're closing for the winter. What? What are you going to do to earn a living? Well, we'll get another job. And Jerry Johnson, the teacher who works at Buena Vista University in Storm Lake, Iowa. And I've been to the university. They had me up there as a speaker doing some presentations and all that. And right next to it, just about 10, maybe 15 minutes away, they have a water park. But it was closed. And I said, what, was it not? They said, oh, well, it'll be open in the summer. I said, how come it's not open now? They said, well, because winter's coming, and, there'll be snow, and nobody wants to go to a water park and all of that. And it's like, oh, geez. And, so when everybody talks about, well, Walt was going to put a dome over, Walt Disney World, basically Walt was thinking, what can we do if we're going to go to the East Coast? What can we do to control the climate so that we can operate year-round? This doesn't seem to make sense. And so then Walt started to look at other places that, already had, tourists that were coming. And Niagara Falls was one of those. And he looked at the Seagram Tower, which is on the Canadian side. And it's like, there's really just not enough land here, and maybe in the tower we could put a Circle Vision theater. Maybe in the tower we could put in Flight to the Moon or something like that, and that still didn't work out. And NBC, of course, had not given up. NBC, said, look. Okay, you don't like New Jersey. Okay, we found a better place for you. Palm Beach, Florida, because they had connections with John D. MacArthur. He was a billionaire, from banking and all of that, and he had connections with NBC, RCA, and he had a lot of land down there in Palm Beach, and it was like, well, okay, now you're not going to have to worry about the weather. You could probably operate, year round. You're not going to have to worry about snow flurries and freezing, in Palm Beach. But MacArthur, like a lot of billionaires, was a little bit eccentric, and so it was difficult to negotiate with him. And then around this time, Walt's reading these books on urban planning and all this, and he's thinking, I don't just want to build another, theme park. I want to have it connected to, a city and all of this. And so he starts seeing if he can negotiate for some additional land. And MacArthur just blows up. He's offended that, all of this was almost done, and now the Disneys want more land. All right, you're out of here, buddy. And so Walt is thinking of all sorts of things. In Marceline, Missouri, he had Rush Johnson buy up hundreds of acres of land around the original Disney farm, because Walt was going to open a place called Walt's Boyhood Farm, which would have been a recreation of an actual working farm from the turn of the century, and also a little town, barber shop and things like this. And Johnson said, "But Walt, this Marceline is just so out of the way." And Walt says, "You let me worry about that. When I go on TV and I do those introductions and I go, the next time you're in Missouri, make sure you stop by Walt's Boyhood Farm in Marceline, and that'll drive people." Well, Buzz Price did a survey and showed that no, Marceline is so out of the way, and it's so difficult to get there that this place is not going to be able to turn a profit. And so Walt said, "Well, we'll just make it non-profit then." And while all of this is going on, St. Louis, Missouri, it comes to Walt, because they're going to be celebrating their bicentennial, and they would like Walt to do some sort of thing in St. Louis, and so this is where the St. Louis Arch comes from. It's to celebrate the bicentennial. That's where their big stadium comes from, and
it's where also urban legend comes from, because I think if people hear St. Louis and they're like, yeah, we know the story, Walt was going to build there, but the only reason why he didn't was because of this quote, legendary dispute that he had.
Encounter with Anheuser-Busch.
Right, about the selling of alcohol in the parks. And that's really not the reason why it didn't go through. I mean, Walt had actually found a way to sort of reconcile that issue. So that's really not the reason why this East Coast Disneyland was not built in St. Louis.
You're absolutely right. But again, it's such a great story. It takes on this life of its own that it keeps on going and going and going. And Walt didn't want alcohol in his entertainment venues, because he felt that alcohol changes the entire tone. It also changes the personality of the people who are there. And that's why there was no alcohol at Disneyland, is because he saw, it had that effect. And Walt's feeling was, no, if you want a drink, that's fine. Just go across the street to the Disneyland Hotel and get a drink. But once you're in the park, we don't want people drinking. And so for the St. Louis project, which was going to be called Riverfront Square, there was going to be no drinking, and because again, the same thing. Walt liked to control the whole environment there for that to happen. And what got Walt interested was that as part of the bicentennial, St. Louis had set aside this acreage where they were going to create this sort of mall, outdoor mall by the waterfront. That there'd be no cars. There'd be a old-fashioned theater, in the shape of a steamboat, a Mississippi paddle wheeler, and inside they would show silent films during the day, and in the evening they would do live performances of melodramas and all of that. And Walt thought, look, you've got all of this land here, and in order for it to work, during the whole year, we're going to make this enclosed. It's going to be this massive, 5-story building that goes on for a couple of blocks. And the 5 stories weren't just 5 stories. A story or two of them would have been underground as well, so that, you don't have this huge, massive structure there. And to get around the alcohol, around the top, there would have been an observation area that would have had restaurants and bars and things like that, and you could access that, and it was separate from the amusement area.
So it actually really did satisfy all the things that he wanted, right? It was going to be enclosed because it was going to be in those 2 city blocks, and the concern that he had would have been in an area that was separate from the theme park area, where he wouldn't have to worry about kids and families maybe being subjected to, not that we see it now in even with Magic Kingdom serving alcohol, but any of his fears in terms of that overlap were alleviated.
Right, and so if somebody wanted to go from the restaurants and the bars and all that into the amusement area, they would have to have their hand stamped, and that way they could also monitor, if the person had maybe overindulged, because again, Walt ran into that actually at Disneyland. A lot of people don't realize that in the early days of Disneyland, on the other side of the train track where New Orleans Square is now, on the other side of the train track was an area called Holiday Land, which was, the big circus tent from the Mickey Mouse Club Circus, and there was a volleyball, and there's baseball diamonds and all that. So it's very much like a park. And the whole point of that is that, convention groups or company business parties or whatever could be held there. It was called Holiday Land because at Disneyland, every day is a holiday. But again, Holiday Land was separate from Disneyland. So in order to get into Disneyland, you had to buy, an admission, and you had to buy a ticket and whatever. And so that was one of the reasons that Holiday Land, fell apart is, yes, we're going to Disneyland. We're going to Holiday Land. Oh, great. And so you're in Holiday Land, and you can see that Disneyland is just over the train tracks, but you can't get there. And in Holiday Land, they did sell beer because Walt felt that beer was part of the experience of a picnic. And so oftentimes some of these people would just get too much beer and they would stumble across the train tracks. It never occurred to anybody, my gosh, these are train tracks. You shouldn't be walking over these. They'd stumble across these and end up in Disneyland. And if they had stumbled across the train tracks, by the time they got into Disneyland, they were more than a little inebriated. And so Walt just stopped all of that nonsense. But yeah, if you can control, where this is, and control the alcohol that's being given, it makes a difference. I worked at one of the things I did at Walt Disney World is I worked at Epcot, and for 2 of the New Year's celebrations, I had to coordinate the special viewing section, for guests with disabilities and things like that. And I saw people around the walkway who, had the lanyards and then had this, yard long of beer or whatever, and some of them, just curled up in fetal positions on the walkway where I had to phone security to come so that they could be, taken backstage and all that, because he had just celebrated a little too much. So, I don't know, maybe things are different nowadays, but I remember that. So Walt's idea of, controlling all of that, it comes from a point of, Walt wasn't a teetotaler. It was like, how is this affecting, everybody else and their experience? And so, one of the great things about, and St. Louis too, we're talking about myths and all of that. One of the myths is, when the St. Louis Riverfront Square project, fell apart, then Walt looked elsewhere, and that's when he found Florida. No, he had already found Florida. And Walt, heaven help us, thought that he could build both the St. Louis Riverfront Square and Walt Disney World at the same time.
Well, because I think one thing people might not understand, Jim, is what he was going to build in St. Louis was not a carbon copy of Disneyland, and obviously that's not what he originally intended to do in Florida. Yes, he was going to build a Magic Kingdom as a secondary, almost tertiary thing to what Epcot was going to be, but the St. Louis project was really going to be a celebration of St. Louis itself, and some of the attractions there were not things that they were not carbon copies of stuff they found in Disneyland. So while there was, in your book you talk about the Bayou boat ride, it was not Pirates of the Caribbean, and the Haunted House was not a copy of the Haunted Mansion. These were going to be unique offerings that were going to have a very different, a story and theme than what guests would have experienced in Disneyland. So theoretically, it could have operated in tandem or parallel with whatever he was going to build in terms of another Disneyland elsewhere.
Without being in competition. But when I'm saying building at the same time, I'm thinking about the talent, I'm thinking about the money, I'm thinking about the resources, and you're absolutely right. The concept for the entertainment complex there in St. Louis was that half of the building would celebrate St. Louis at the turn of the century, the 1900s, which was a very favorite time period for Walt. And then the other half would celebrate New Orleans before the Civil War, so around the 1850s. And you are absolutely right that he had his Imagineers there. Let's devise some attractions that could be held in this contained area, and you're absolutely right. Things that are different than Disneyland, but reminiscent of Disneyland. So yes, there'd be that Bayou boat ride where you'd go down a waterfall, but it was more of a nature, experience, and you'd see audio animatronic alligators and all that, and then you'd get out of that by going up the waterfall. And this is all before Pirates of the Caribbean at Disneyland, and then he came up with the idea of one of the most famous pirates in New Orleans is Jean Lafitte, and so there would be an adventure ride where you would see pirates, and then he thought, wait a minute, what if we combine that with the Bayou boat ride, And you're right, the Haunted House, and again, remember, the Haunted Mansion didn't show up at Disneyland till 1969, and we're talking 1963, 1964 right here. And so the Haunted House would have a stretching room which would take guests to a lower floor, and you'd have the rooms of illusion, which sound an awful lot to me like Rolly Crump's idea for Museum of the Weird there, and there would be a one of the restaurants would actually be a full-size steamboat in an indoor lake, and it would have live shows, and there would be an opera house that would have a show similar to Golden Horseshoe Revue, because Walt wanted to have the French can-can dancers because he knew that was an audience favorite, but it would be themed to St. Louis. And he tentatively on the blueprints, there's only one set of blueprints, and it sold in 2015 for $27,000. This was done up by Marvin, and it's now in a private collection. So lots of luck for anybody to ever take a look at that and see what some of that is. But on those blueprints, he had tentatively put in 2 Fantasyland dark rides. One was going to be Peter Pan's Flight, because that was the most popular Disneyland dark ride. And then the other was either going to be Snow White's Adventures or Pinocchio. And this is before Pinocchio was at Disneyland. And then he thought about doing maybe a Davy Crockett and Mike Fink, ride. And then he was going to have a theater that, in terms of layout, was very similar to the Country Bear Jamboree, where there would be, the main stage, and then on the sides there would be those smaller stages that, rotated, so you could have actually 2 scenes instead of 1. And you're going to have figures from Missouri history, like John Philip Sousa and Charles Lindbergh, the Spirit of St. Louis, for that to happen. And this is, all pretty elaborate here. And it's like, oh my gosh, well, this sounds like a done deal. Well, it was, except what made it fall apart, as many Disney deals do, is the money. Who's going to pay? Right? Walt felt that Disney would supply the show. That means they'd design and build the rides, the attractions. They'd, train the staff, all of this type of stuff. They'd run the operation. But what St. Louis would have to do is they would have to not only build the shell of the building, but also the interior, the interior infrastructure, so that Disney could just come in and do the rides. They wouldn't have to do all of that stuff. And St. Louis would have to handle, the parking, extend and also extend the roadways. This is one of the reasons that things like Port Disney in Long Beach and Westcott in Anaheim fell apart. Same reason is because the cities involved didn't want to contribute, even though having a Disney venue there was going to bring in millions, in terms of tax dollars, and create hundreds of new jobs. The cities, how can we, devote this money to, for Long Beach, the Disney company wanted them to expand the Long Beach freeway, and have off-ramps that went right from the freeway into the parking garage that they had there. And Long Beach, Disney shouldn't be asking us to do stuff like that. And even in Marceline, for Walt's boyhood farm, they were making arrangements so that the state of Missouri would extend the roadway from Marceline up to a main crossroads that went to different parts of the state. So anyway, St. Louis falls apart because Disney says, yes, we'll do this, but you have to do this. And then what Disney would do is, once the venue was successful, they would have in the contract is they would reimburse St. Louis and, in effect, buy back everything, so that Disney then owned everything.
And Jim, I'm not saying that this is why it was done, but hindsight being 2020, this was brilliant on Disney's part, because what it does is, one, it either A, gets St. Louis to fully fund what they want to build so that they can go ahead and build Florida at the same time and not have to worry about being so much in the red trying to build too. And if it doesn't work, as is what happened, it sends a message to whether it's Orlando, Ocala, Miami, wherever, saying, hey, if you want us to come to your state, to your city, this is what the ask is going to be. And I think that's why Florida said, yeah, basically anything you want, you've got our full cooperation. And more importantly, as we get closer to what what they ended up asking for, you want to build a nuclear power plant? Have yourself at it. You want to be your own quasi-government entity? God bless you. Here you go. So it was an absolute win-win from the Disney side.
I think you are right on the nose. I think you put your finger right on that, and I think you're right that Orlando saw what was happening up there in St. Louis, because again, what happened is what is it, about July 1965 or so is when Disney said, no, well, we're not coming to St. Louis because, we said that this might be a difficult challenge and we might not be able to address all of those challenges. So they're doing that in July. And then in November, they're announcing, hey, we're coming to Orlando. And you are absolutely right. You have the governor, you have the legislature, whatever you want, whatever you want, we'll make this happen. Can you make this happen over? Actually, they wanted it to open the next year, and Walt was saying, well, it will, once we get the approvals, it'll take maybe up to 3 years for us to get all of this, up and running in place. But you're absolutely right. And even when the governor changed from Burns to Kirk is the same thing. Yes, we're you want this, you got this. And you're right about the nuclear power plant. That's part of the agreement in the Reedy Creek Improvement District stuff, is that Disney has the authority and permission to build a nuclear power plant. And, of course, that was in relationship to, you're going to be building a city here, And so a lot of times some people argue that Reedy Creek Improvement District shouldn't exist anymore because the city was never built, And we can go into Reedy Creek Improvement District. That's a whole nother story. In fact, I devoted an entire chapter in the book to explaining, all of that, because a lot of people are very confused about what that is. But yes, you're absolutely right. I think what happened in St. Louis sent that signal to Orlando of, it doesn't make any difference, if we've bought land, if we're willing to walk away. We're willing to walk away. How badly do you want us here? And that, of course, was Michael Eisner's famous phrase when he was announcing the Disney decade, and he said they're going to be doing another Disney park in Southern California, and he says, we're either going to go, with Long Beach or with Anaheim, whichever city wants us more.
And look, it makes the courtship process very easily if one person says, hey, we are going to give you anything and everything you want. You can't, 100% cooperation. There's nowhere else to go. Like, that clearly makes for Orlando, they went all in. For Florida, goes all in terms of you don't need to look anywhere else because you can't get anything more than 100% cooperation.
Well, and again, I hope we'll be talking about Roy Disney as well too, because I don't feel he gets enough recognition and appreciation. When Walt passed away, and Roy was taking over, the Walt Disney World project. He had executives coming to him and say, "Well, Roy, anything you want, we can get because they want us so badly." And Roy says, "We're not going to do that because we may need to come back to them again in the future, and a good deal is a good deal for everyone." And so here's this guy who has this reputation as a tough businessman, and he would not put up with any nonsense at all. It had to be clear, and it had to be fair, and it had to be honest, and all of that. But he was not going to take advantage of Orlando. A lot of people think Disney did take advantage of Orlando, but on the other hand, you take a look at all the advantages that came from having Disney out in Orlando, and again, it's the vacation destination of the world.
But look, before we even get to Orlando, obviously the ultimate choice, that was not the only consideration in Florida. Palm Beach was one of the places that was looked at very, very closely, and even more close to Orlando, Lake Buena Vista, Ocala was almost the home of Walt Disney World as well.
That's right, because and again, Walt was very familiar with this area because, believe it or not, his mom and dad got married out here, and in fact, the first marriage certificate ever issued in Kismet, which no longer exists, and his dad had a orange grove. He ran the Halifax Hotel in Daytona Beach for a while, and all this, all before they moved back to Chicago there, but some of Walt's relatives on his mother's side, stayed out here and were school teachers and school principal and things like that. And supposedly, and again, this is one of the frustrating things, when you're dealing with Disney history, is you're looking for documentation. You're looking for, the smoking guns and all that. And the time has passed so much that, sometimes you just can't find that, material, but the story that kept cropping up, even though you can't verify it, is that Walt and Roy sometimes, during their summer vacation from school, would come down here and would fish in the Ocala National Forest, which was where some of their relatives were living. But again, you go through, and so much happened in Walt's life. He doesn't talk about that, although he talks about Marceline, which he only lived in for 5 years. But you think he spent his entire life there. But yeah, they looked at Ocala, and a lot of it becomes, where can we get land? Where can we get enough land? And when we talk about why Florida and why Orlando, it is that, Walt wanted it, far enough up the coast and far enough inland so that you're not dealing with hurricanes. And he also wanted it far enough inland so that it's not that near the beach, because he didn't want the beach, competing with the entertainment venue, and he didn't want, people in bathing suits, walking into the park, dripping bathing suits into the park. And also in Orlando, they were building the roadways, so you have right there that crossroads where you have a road that goes north-south and then another that goes east-west, so you can connect both coasts and you can connect the entire state. And the feeling was, because in those days, the big tourist draw was Miami. Mm-hmm. And so what Walt was thinking was, because people were in their cars after World War II, that was it. People wanted to go out in cars, and again, plane flight was fairly rare. And so Walt's feeling was, we'll get them as they're driving down to Miami, and we'll get them when they're driving back up. So this is the place to be.
Well, I think it also made sense too, Jim, because while it was, look, what this area looks like now is very different than it looked like in the mid-'60s. It was very agricultural. We're still seeing some of those orange groves, even in this area, just north and west of Magic Kingdom. Those orange groves that were there from day one are starting to disappear and become residential communities and tourist locations. But there was a very small, quote, basic bit of tourism here with some of the zoos and Gatorlands and some of the things. So there was
Weeki Wachee Springs.
I remember coming to Weeki Wachee as a kid, right? Marineland
and all of these were called roadside attractions because basically they were along the side of the road, and so as people were driving down that main thoroughfare, you see this sign, world's largest ball of string. And so, you want to pull off to go see that, right? And do all of that. So there were those roadside attractions. And again, Florida was the place where people would come down to drive because the weather was generally, pretty nice. And in some ways, especially since you had a limited vacation, it's, sort of exotic. You got St. Augustine, the oldest city in the United States. You can go see Ponce de Leon's Fountain of Youth. You can go see alligators. There were so many alligator farms. Not just Gatorland, but they were all throughout there. And not only that, but you could buy live gators that you could mail to a friend. I'm looking forward to that day where I can just stop by the side of the road and pack up an alligator and mail it to Lou Mangello and his family.
Well, even places like Cypress Gardens, and I remember as a kid, because we drove from New Jersey, even if Walt Disney wasn't our final destination, we hit a lot of these places. My dad was so, Clark Griswold, like, let's go see the fourth largest ball of twine. Wouldn't you rather do that instead of going to Magic Kingdom? But we did. We went to, like Marineland.
Probably Silver Springs with the glass bottom boat ride. Well, and this is where Tarzan was filmed.
But places like Cypress Gardens were smart enough to realize that Walt Disney World coming here was not going to be, yes, it's competition, but it's also complimentary. Like they were very welcoming of Disney because they realized that people who were coming to Walt Disney World might look around to see what else was in the area and may take a day trip over to things like Cypress Gardens, which is now Legoland.
Right. Well, and again, what happens there is that when Walt Disney World opens, you're absolutely right. The attendance at these places all soar. Not just that, but Cape Kennedy and all, even Silver Springs, for crying out, with its glass bottom boat ride, and Cypress Gardens. You're absolutely right. It was just huge, with their water ski shows and all of that.
And look, and you can still go. You can still go to Gatorland. You want to see a little You want to get a little taste of what old Florida the amusement parks are like. Go spend the day at Gatorland.
Well, I will.
My son loves it. My son loves it there.
I love taking. When when friends come out here, I love taking them to Gatorland because Gatorland is a good half-day attraction, and it's exotic. You walk through this big concrete and steel gator mouth, you know. And
it's very low tech. It is a very low tech experience.
Well, you can still see gator wrestling.
Yep.
You can still see the jumperoo where alligators, you know, leap out of the pond to grab hold of dead chickens that are on this clothesline hanging over the pond. You know, it really is, yeah, a glimpse into old Florida there, and in fact, there's even a little restaurant there where you can eat alligator, which really does taste like chicken, but I think it tastes like chicken because alligators eat chicken,
right?
Yeah, so I think so when you get gator nuggets, you know, and all of this, and it's like, well, this really does taste like chicken. And I remember telling my mom and dad, you know, if it tastes like chicken, why don't we just get chicken? Why are we getting gator?
And I think even over at Legoland, the last time isn't there still a section of Cypress Gardens that is still open that has the
yes, that still has the gardens. And then what they've also done is they built things with Legos because one of the most photographed things is you had these Southern Bells and these big hoop skirts and all that. Well, now they have Lego recreations of them that you can get a picture of. And I don't know if they still have it, but when it became Legoland, they did have a water ski show, which was, you know, the most popular thing that Dick Pope put in there. But they had people dressed up as Lego characters doing doing the water ski show, you know, and but again, you know, Disney doesn't want you doing that. That's why they built 4 theme parks and 2 water parks and a downtown shopping area and all of that. It's like, you don't want to go to Church Street Station.
Yeah.
You don't want to go to, you know.
I think we as locals sometimes, if you want to be a little curious, you want to be a little adventurous, you want to sort of see, you know, what it was, especially some of these places that have been around. You know, I've taken my kids for nostalgic reasons.
I have friends who refuse to go to Crossroads because it's not Disney. Literally, this is serious. You know, where do you want to eat? Well, let's eat it at Crossroads. You know, because there's a big variety and it's less expensive. You know, than Disney Springs. Well, but that's not Disney.
Jim,
I said, once upon a time, you know, Disney owned all of that land.
And that area is going to change too. The Crossroads is going to. A lot of the Crossroads is going away
by the end of this year, beginning of next year, and I'm going to be sorry to see it go. And I'm wondering where some of those restaurants and businesses are going to relocate. You know, and when I came out in '95, the McDonald's there was actually a Disney museum. They had plexiglass display areas of Disneyana, comic books and toys.
No kidding.
And things like, yeah, but what happened is, this is why you got to think these things through. The sun would come in and the heat would come in and it faded, you know, a lot of that stuff there. So, you know, when they rehabbed that McDonald's, all of that left. But, they had Disney posters and things like that. And there was a Disney gift shop over there. Now it's all just restaurants, but there was a Disney gift shop over there where you could buy, you know, Disney gifts that you couldn't get, you know, in the park.
Jim Korkus, I still believe, and I believe I am not alone, that you can take a little corner of Disney Springs, or what I believe will eventually be an expansion of Disney Springs, and put a little Disney museum there. Jim Korkus should be the curator, obviously. It should be like a Jim Korkus audio animatronic figure that just follows you around and tells you all these stories. But imagine having a little bit of Walt Disney World history. Think about what you had over at One Man's Dream at a place that people can go and visit. And of course, let's be realistic, of course there's going to be a gift shop there. We see this renewed sense of nostalgia with Orange Bird and everything else that's old is new again. I think it would be such an attractor for guests, and you would certainly be the best person to do it, because I do believe in my little nostalgic heart of hearts, Jim Korkis, that a lot of people who come to Walt Disney World now, especially first timers, don't know a lot about the history, don't know a lot about the stories, which is why I love doing these. We literally are just in this hour that we've been talking, scratching the surface.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to Walt Disney World opening because there's a whole set of stories, before we even get there.
There is so much.
And again, even though my book is over 300 pages, I had at least 300 pages that I had to leave, on
the cutting room floor.
On the floor, I had to remove in order just so you have something that is manageable, to get through. Because I wanted to cover not just the creation of Walt Disney World. I wanted to cover, what each of the lands, were like when they opened in 71, because there were attractions and things there that, don't even exist anymore. And then I had to have chapters to cover, the resort hotels, and then the recreation and the bob-along boats and, all of that. And, chapters devoted to some of the people who were involved. Because, again, the story of Walt Disney World back in 1971 and even today is the story of the people who are working there. Oftentimes they don't get the recognition or the credit, but they're the ones who've created, that magic for us. That's why I always try to mention the names of artists and Imagineers and whoever, entertainers, whatever, who were involved, because that's really the magic. The magic really is the people there, and they make a difference. I think your listeners may agree with me that if you run into a cast member who really does have that pixie dust, it just makes it a whole different experience. It just reminds you why Disney is different than than anything else, and why even though you had these popular attractions, and even after Walt Disney World opened, there were attractions that opened like Splendid China and Baseball and Boardwalk, all of these that and none of them
and some
survived.
that never came to be. Like, remember Vita Land? Remember the talk about Vita Land?
Oh gosh, yeah. I remember when there was going to be the David Copperfield
Magic
Underground.
Yeah.
That was going to be so cool. It was announced there was going to be a Roy Rogers Western Land. And my gosh, I'm a huge Roy Rogers fan. I got to meet Roy Rogers in person. He was one of my heroes when I was a kid there, and so there's a ton of these things, but Disney is the one that survives. So Circus World seems to be an asterisk, in there. They were going to build Hurricane World. They was going to, Little England, because many of the tourists that come over from the UK. And I don't know if you ever got a chance to go into Xanadu, the House of the Future there.
Since you had Splendid China, you might as well have Little England too. So, but I think, Jim, next time we do this, because as we count down to the anniversary of Walt Disney World, I think we can talk about some of the decisions, some of the deception, a little bit of the mystery that was associated with it, as well as, with dreams coming true, sometimes there are a few nightmares as well, and we'll certainly talk about some of the people.
Again, I think what happened because I interviewed a lot of people, because you want to get it, from the people who were there, You still have to go through and verify because people's memories are fluid. Most of them told me, we just figured, well, we've already built Disneyland. This is going to be easy. We just build it again out here. But again, the weather is different. The demographics are different. Marty Sklar told me one of the false assumptions we had was that everybody who lived in Florida was retired.
Right.
And and so suddenly that, and again, as I said, suddenly you can't get things, and so you have California workers, and they want Coors beer, and so Coors beer isn't sold, east of the Rockies, and so what happened is in California they would load up Coors beer into these crates that were marked Peter Pan's Flight Mechanics, and they would ship them out by truck out here so that there'd be Coors beer to give, to help some of these people get through just getting the work done, and so, yeah, and even hiring people for the preview center. They said, we had young ladies show up, and some of them had never worn shoes before because they had grown up, on the orange grove,
right.
Picking the fruit, all of that, that type of thing. So they'd grown up on a farm, and so it was a very unsophisticated area. A lot of people don't realize why they showed the Epcot film where they did at a theater was because there was no movie theater in Orlando.
That's right. There literally was nowhere else to show it except going to Winter Park.
That's it. Yeah, it was a brand new theater that had just opened 2 years earlier, and so that was the only theater that was available and that could seat the number of people who would come in. So yeah, we've got plenty of stories, and in fact, maybe some of your listeners have some questions, or maybe they even have some memories. Maybe they were even around, in 71. And again, you were absolutely right. Orlando was an agricultural community. You could go down the street and you'd see cows, not just orange groves. You'd see cows and things like that.
You still can if you not very far from Magic Kingdom.
Now it has become totally devoted to hospitality. So unless you're working at an amusement venue or you're working at a restaurant or a hotel, there really aren't any jobs in Orlando. That's what that is. It's always so much fun talking to you, Lou. First off, because you're so knowledgeable, but also because you just let me go on and on and on. No, because you're just so passionate and excited about these things, just like I am. History is still very much a living thing, and history is not just names and dates and milestones, and it's people. It's the story of people, and that's what makes it interesting. And there are plenty more stories to share, and I hope people will go to Amazon.com or ThemeParkPress.com and pick up the unofficial Walt Disney World 1971 companion, because it's filled with stories of how the world began. And I was just so fortunate, and to have talked with so many of these people, and I really do feel the obligation that I need to share their stories with other people, and especially those who enjoy it, and hopefully your listeners do as well. So thank you very much, and I'll look forward to coming back again.
We will definitely do this again. I very much appreciate you, my friend. And again, I'll put a link in this week's show notes to all of Jim Korkis's many books that you can find. And I would love to hear from you, sharing your stories and conversation. Come over to Facebook. If you go to wdwradio.com/community, you can be part of the conversation there. And again, I'll also put links to Jim's books in there as well. My friend Jim Korkis, thank you so much for being here. I look forward to picking up where we leave off with some additional stories about the beginnings of Walt Disney World soon.
Thank you, Lou, and to all your listeners, may all your Disney dreams come true.
It's time for our Walt Disney World Trivia Question of the Week, where I invite you to test your knowledge of Walt Disney World's history, or see how well you pay attention to the details, sometimes in what you see, sometimes in what you hear, maybe in what you eat. And if you think you know the answer, you can enter via our online form for a chance to win a Disney Prize package. Of course, before we get to this week's question, we're going to go back, review last week's, and select our winner. So on our last show, we were talking about space, and I talked about how in 1986, to celebrate the grand opening of the Star Tours attraction in Disneyland, Disney had a TV special that starred Gil Gerard, he was Buck Rogers, Ernie Reyes Jr., and other celebrities, including C-3PO and R2-D2, who started to rap, etc. Anyway, your question last week was to tell me what was the name of this TV special called, and I even gave you more than just a hint. I told you exactly where to find it other than the Google. If you went back to show number 68, I did a very detailed DSI Disney Scene investigation of Star Tours, including the history of the attraction, the story, the queue, the shop, and maybe little predictions of what the future might hold. Don't know how right or wrong I might have been. Look, it was episode 68. It was like 10 years ago. Anyway, your question was to tell me what was it called. And as of many of you got it correct or got very creative, as always, with your answers, the correct answer was A Vacation in Space. So I took all the correct answers, randomly selected one, and again, you were playing for all of my digital products, which is my 102 Ways to Save Money for It at Walt Disney World book, all 7 of my virtual audio walking tours of Magic Kingdom, both of which, by the way, you can still find on the WDW Radio shop and in iTunes, a WDW Radio vinyl sticker, and a pop socket for your phone. And last week's winner, randomly selected, is Melissa Mendoza. So Melissa, congratulations. You used the form. I have your shipping information. I will get your package out to you right away. If you played last week and didn't win, don't sweat it, because here's your next chance to enter in this week's Walt Disney World Trivia Challenge. So we'll go from Hollywood Studios to Magic Kingdom. One of my favorite parts of the day and the evening is not just lunch and dinner and snack time and everything in between, but I still enjoy the nighttime fireworks shows and castle projection shows. And currently, Happily Ever After is playing in Magic Kingdom. And I want you to tell me what company sponsors Magic Kingdom's Happily Ever After fireworks show. You have until 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, May 26th to go to WDWRadio.com, click on this week's podcast, use the form there, because again, you're playing not just for the books, the audio tours, the vinyl sticker, and pop socket, but this week I will throw in a WDW Radio shirt as well. So good luck and have fun. That's going to do it for this week's show. Thank you so very much for taking the time to tune in this and every week. I want you to be part of the community and conversation, so please go over to wdwradio.com/community and join our Box People group on Facebook. Big thanks, huge thanks, monstrous thanks once again to everyone who is part of the WDW Radio Nation family. I sincerely appreciate your friendship and your help and your love, support, and I love being able to give back to you and say thank you each and every month. I want to thank some of the new members who've joined the hundreds of you who are part of the Nation family, including Eric Hawks, Wade Tonkin, Courtney Peterman, Eric Grimes, Keith Groshans, and Greg Wilder. To find out how you can not only help the show, but also receive exclusive rewards every month, including scavenger hunts. We have a private Facebook group, Magic Band covers, logo gear, t-shirts, monthly care packages from Walt Disney World, exclusive live video group calls, early access to special events, and lots more. Visit WDWRadio.com/support. And don't forget that not only is it completely optional, but it's a great way for you to help show your support for the show. And don't forget that a portion of the proceeds of your contributions do go to the Dream Team Project to benefit the Make-A-Wish Foundation of America. Speaking of community, this show is not just for you, but by you, and something I want to do with you. So I want to hear from you. You can connect with me on social. I am at Lou Mongello on Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook. Again, don't forget to join the Box People group. If you have a question you want me to answer on the air, you can email me, lou@wdwradio.com, or call the voicemail at 407-900-9391 with a question, a comment, or just a hello from the parks. Of course, nothing beats a handshake and a hug. That is why I continue to do monthly meetups in Walt Disney World. Stay tuned for the meet location and time for June. I don't have an exact date as yet. It'll probably be mid to late in the month, but if you go to the events page at wdwradio.com/events, you can find out not only about upcoming meets of the month, but other special events, group adventures by Disney, group cruises. We still have one spot left for our trip to Japan via Adventures by Disney this October. We have a few spots left for our cruise out of New Orleans in February 2019, and I have other events and announcements coming very soon. Also, I have other meetups while I'm not necessarily in Walt Disney World, but on the road as I travel to speak and consult. And speaking of speaking, if you go to LouMongello.com, you can find out how I can speak to your conference, to your school, to your business, or I can even work with you directly about turning your passion into your profession with personal mentoring and small group coaching. Our Momentum Weekend Retreat in Walt Disney World for June is currently sold out. However, there are still tickets available, and I'm still offering early bird pricing on our Momentum Weekend Workshop, September 28th and 29th here in Walt Disney World. Again, to find out more about any ways that I can try and help you, visit LouMongello.com. Thanks as always to Becky Menken and the entire team at Mousefan Travel, whether you're going to World, Land, Cruise Line, Adventures by Disney, or any destination on the planet. She and her team of agents can help you get the best possible prices, all available discounts, all at no cost to you, but more importantly, with an incredible level of personal service that is their hallmark. Visit celebrationspress.com to find out how you can subscribe to Celebrations Magazine. And as always, my friend, and you are my friend, whether we have met yet or not, all I ask is that if you like this show, please help spread the word. Let others know about it. Tweet out that you're listening to this or your favorite episode. Share it on Facebook, and if you can, take 30 seconds to rate and review the show over on iTunes. I want to thank some recent reviewers like Ryan, the UPS carrier, who says, "I'm a happier postal worker. With only 12 days left until my Walt Disney World first experience, I can't help but feel Lou's happy personality getting you ready for your day. While I travel for long periods every day being a carrier, you feel like you always have a friend with you. With all the amazing guests and food reviews, you can't forget about that. And all the up-to-date news. It's a perfect blend of all things Disney that you can hear so that you can have the best day ever." Thank you, Ryan from Indiana. Inflate-A-Bunny says, "I am the girl with the Disney tattoo. I can't say enough about how much I adore," in all caps, so I have to say it with emphasis, "Lou and WDW Radio. I've learned so much and have taken my Disney dorkdom to a whole new level. I have a long commute, and I definitely would not have made it without Lou and his amazing guests, his brilliant trivia, his thoughtful interviews, and his mouth-wateringly on-point food reviews. Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Inflate-A-Bunny with your Disney tattoo." And DPots86 says, "This podcast may change your life, ... for the better." It's tough to describe how subscribing to this podcast has changed my life, but there's no denying it has. I can thank WDW Radio for little things like listening to an episode and getting me out of a glum mood, all the way to getting a chance to stand in Walt Disney's office and tour Walt Disney Imagineering. Lou's tagline of "We're friends whether we've met yet or not" is absolutely true. By being a listener to the podcast, you're joining a community that leaves the things that divide us behind to celebrate our love of all things Disney. You'll laugh, you'll cry, hopefully not too much crying, you'll make new friends, you'll learn things you never knew, and yes, you will get hungry hearing about the snacks and dining opportunities Disney has to offer. So I urge you to click subscribe, join us for live broadcasts on Wednesday night, or better yet, come to a WDW Radio event and meet Lou in person. I promise you'll never meet a nicer guy. David, obviously I know who you are. I am incredibly choked up and touched and honored, my friend. You and Inflata Bunny and Ryan and everybody else who you guys make up this incredible community. I just built the clubhouse, right? You guys are the ones that populate it. I am incredibly, incredibly grateful to you and for you, and I appreciate you taking just a couple of minutes to put a review in iTunes. And when I talk about my gratitude, I want you to understand how much you mean to me and how sincere I am. And that's why I reach out and talk about finding ways to try and help you, because you have given me the gift of getting to do what I love every day and share it with you. And if you aren't doing what you love every day, you're wasting what little time you have. And if I can help you in some small or big way, do that, please, whether it's momentum, an email, a message, whatever it might be. I would love to try and help you however I can. And it's a way for me to repay the gifts that you have given me and hopefully have a positive impact on you and your life beyond the confines of the show and the community. But with that, I hope that this is your best week ever. I love you. I appreciate you. So until next time, see ya.
Hey, Lou, it's Christine Morrison from Flowertown, PA. I just had to call and tell you that I just had a client drop their doggies off at my house, and she works on film in California, and she had a sweatshirt on that had like the Boba Fett helmet, and it said season 1. And I said, oh, I love your sweatshirt. She goes, oh, yeah, I'm working on this new Star Wars series. And I said, The Mandalorian? And she goes, yeah. She goes, I can't believe you knew that. So I have to pick her brain about this. I forget exactly what she's doing for the show, but how awesome is that? So when she comes to pick up, I'm going to have a conversation about her role in the production of The Mandalorian. So pretty awesome. Thought I'd pass it along because I know how excited everybody is for that. So anyway, have a great day. It's Friday morning. Make somebody smile. It's going to be a really long weekend here at my house. We have 10 dogs staying here this weekend with my business that I have. So I'm doing a lot of cleaning and organizing. But I'm listening to your podcast, which gives me the encouragement to keep moving forward and keeps me entertained while I take care of all the craziness. So everybody have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you on the box on Wednesday night. Bye-bye.
Hey, Lou, this is Clint Jensen giving you a call, thanking you for the episode, or the multiple episodes on Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Getting super excited to go see it. Hopefully everybody is the same. The detail that you guys described just only gets me more excited. Thank you for all you do. And everybody enjoy their week. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Hi, Lou. It's Elizabeth from Massachusetts. It is 3:03 on Tuesday, May 14th, and I'm driving home from work. Sadly, after arriving home last night from Walt Disney World, my cheerleading team was finally there this past weekend, competing at the D2 Summit at the ESPN Wide World of Sports. Congrats to any listeners who had kids, either coaching or actually competing, and a part of the program. All of the gyms and all of the teams looked amazing. And like I said before on the voicemail, no one does cheerleading competitions quite like the partnership between Disney and Varsity. So it was an amazing and magical experience. One thing I would like to say, I've been to Crystal Palace hundreds of times in my life, or it feels that way at least, and Ian, the manager there, was amazing, getting all 50 people that were going together on a reservation, sitting near each other, getting a picture with all the characters together. So I wanted to give him a shout out because he was awesome. And as always, the cast members there went through the roof to make our experience magical. Just listened to your Disney and Space podcast, which was great as they always are. So thanks for doing that. I think people sometimes don't know that connection. And it's just, good to have a whole segment on it. So I'm sadly home in the rain in Massachusetts after having spent 5 beautiful days in the Florida sun. So just thought I'd call and let you know how the weekend was, and I'm looking forward to the next show. Thanks for all you do. Bye.
Hey, Lou. Brian from St. Augustine. Just finished your Space and Disney podcast, and you went and talked about the flight of the Navigator. Now, I'm 34 years old. I definitely remember this movie growing up. Had Fred Savage in it, and I had heard, and I looked into it, that a piece of the prop of the flight of the Navigator is in Magic Kingdom over in Tomorrowland with by the cooling station over there, where they have the Disney Vacation Club, I think it is, area. So it's that spaceship. They just added a couple of little things on top of it. And now I had heard that was the prop, and I kind of looked into it, and it definitely is. So I thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, it was pretty cool. I liked the episode. Keep it up, brother. Hope to meet you soon. Talk to you later. Bye.
Hey, Lou and WDW Radio Nation. This is Kent Jensen just calling in with excitement about Galaxy's Edge. We've got our date finally, so we'll be in there on the 12th from 8 till noon. And hopefully a lot of other WDW Radio Nation have got their reservations now that they've opened up the system. So hope all get to enjoy the new land in Disneyland, and can't wait to go and see it in Disney World too. Thanks for all you do. Bye-bye.
Hi, Lou. It's Elizabeth from Massachusetts. It is a very rainy morning at 6:55 on Tuesday, April 30th. I have nonstop been thinking about Avengers Endgame now for about 4 days, and I finally just had to call in. So without giving away anything to the best of my ability, or you might not even be able to play this voicemail, which is totally fine, but I think wanted you to know because I knew you would appreciate it anyway. In the theater I was in, there's a moment towards the end of the movie where a certain character of many gets together, and the whole theater is on the edge of our seats just waiting for, this moment to erupt. And this small little boy towards the front of the theater yelled out in complete silence, "Wakanda forever." And it was the absolute cutest and most magical moment. And I know a lot of people who are Marvel fans aren't Disney fans, but I know that Walt would have been proud and so happy to know that they were creating something that people of all ages and from all walks of life are sitting in a theater and running around on Thursday and Friday nights at midnight to go and watch. So the stories are just as magical as Walt would have loved them. Good versus evil, family, friends, all of those themes were there. I cried, I laughed, and that moment just set me way over the edge. And it was something that I know that Walt would have been proud of, that everyone at Marvel would have been proud of, and I wish that I had worked on the movie so that I could have heard a kid, shout that out in the middle of the theater. So it brought me to tears. But I wanted to share that. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. I hope everyone loved it as much as I did. Can't wait to hear you talk about it, hopefully, on the show. Also, your Star Wars episode 551 I just finished listening to. So good. I'm so excited for Galaxy's Edge. Can't wait. So I'll talk to you guys later. Have a super duper awesome, magical, Disney-filled day on this rainy Tuesday morning in Massachusetts. Bye.
Good morning, Lou Mondello. It's Gabby Naldo from Columbia, Maryland. I'm actually calling from Anaheim. I am currently in downtown Disney. after spending the weekend at Disneyland and California Adventure. And I am actually walking to Pop-Up Disney, the Mickey Celebration exhibit. Super excited, and I'll let you know how it goes. Have a great day. Bye.
Hello, Lou Mongello. It's Darlene Nagy from West Seneca, New York. I'm calling in with a countdown. I have 17 days until I get back to Florida and go to Flower and Garden for the last day. You have 265 days until the New Orleans adventure and cruise out of there. And you have 149 days until the Japan Disney Adventures by Disney. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for that trip to see what you get Becky to eat and show us and tell us about all of the adventures you do while you're in Japan. Have a wonderful, magical weekend, everyone. And it's finally sunny in West Seneca, New York. Love and hugs.